So, very good evening to everybody. So, this is Dr. Fernandus. Today, we are going to discuss about the Glycosamino Glycans. The most mammalian cells are located in tissues where they are surrounded by a complex called extracellular matrix or ECM. This is often referred to as connective tissues. So the extracellular space in animal tissue are filled with a gel-like material. The extracellular matrix, also called the ground substance. So they hold the cell of tissue together and provide the porous pathway for the diffusion of nutrient and oxygen to individual cells. The extracellular matrix is composed of an interlocking meshwork of heteropolysaccharide and fibrous protein. Okay. இப்போ ECM பார்த்தீங்கன்னா அது ரெண்டு பொருட்களால் ஆனது. ஒன்று பார்த்தீங்கன்னா heteropolysaccharide and fibrous protein. ரெண்டும் ஒரு மெஷ் மாதிரி என்ன பண்ணோம், ஒரு இன்டர்லாக் ஆகிருக்கும், ஒன்னோட ஒன்று பிணைந்து காணக்கூடியதாக இருக்கும். ஸோ இதனது epithelial cell and extracellular matrix and underlying cells. These three are the interlockings with each other. The ECM contains three major classes of biomolecules. One, the structural protein. The structural protein is collagen, elastin, and fibrin. The collagen is a main structural protein which is present in muscle and fibers and tendons. Okay, and the second thing is the specialized protein such as the fibrillin and the fibronectin and the laminin. And third one is proteoglycans. So this is the structure of functional unit of extracellular matrix. So extracellular matrix, again, this is the extracellular matrix. Here the gel forming polysaccharide we can see, and we can see here the structural protein collagen and special protein fibrinonectin and integrin and actin filament. And here we can see the plasma membrane and the cytoskeleton. These are the molecules of functional units of extracellular matrix. Okay. And the glycosamino glycans, the heteropolysaccharide in the body are the glycosamino glycans. Okay. So in the heterocyclic polysaccharide பார்த்தீங்கன்னா ரெண்டா பிரிக்கிறோம். ஒன்று வந்து என்னது, ஒன்று வந்து ஹோமோபாலிசாக்கரைட், இன்னொன்று ஹெட்ரோபாலிசாக்கரைட். இந்த ஹெட்ரோபாலிசாக்கரைட் ஒன்று தான் கிளைகோசமினோ கிளைகன்ஸ் ஆர் மியூகோபாலிசாக்கரைட் சொல்கிறோம். என்னது, மியூகோபாலிசாக்கரைட். இந்த கிளைகோஸ் அமினோ கிளைகன்ஸை இன்னொரு மாதிரி சொல்லலாம், கேக், GAG, GAG. It's a lubricant. Actually, these molecules are long and branched polysaccharide containing the repeating disaccharide units. Repeating disaccharide units. Okay. So this is also known as the mucopolysaccharides. Okay. You know very well the polysaccharides are contained, that this is a carbohydrate. So this is one of the classification of carbohydrate. So the carbohydrate classified into monosaccharide, disaccharide, polysaccharide. And the disaccharide which contain 2 units of monosaccharide, polysaccharide which contains more than 10 units of monosaccharide. So when we hydrolyze, so partially the polysaccharide will give the repeating units of disaccharides. Okay. So the glycosamino glycans are highly negatively charged molecule, the carboxy and sulfate group with extended conformation that impart high viscosity solutions. Okay. So GAG பார்த்தீங்கன்னா negatively charged molecule இருக்கும். அது என்னன்னு பார்த்தீங்கன்னா carboxy group and sulfate group. So GAGs are located primarily in the surface of cell. செல்லோட சர்ஃபேஸ்ல இருக்கும், இல்லைனா extracellular matrixல இருக்கும். The special ability to bind large amount of water, producing gel-like matrix that forms the body ground substances. Okay, the gags differ from each other in a number of following properties. So these are what differ from each other. Okay, and so one, the chain length. First thing is chain length. The gags are what? The chain length is too high when compared with the disaccharide and monosaccharide and another polysaccharide. And the amino sugar composition here, the amino sugar is D-glucosamine or D-galactosamine. Glucosamine or galactosamine. And uronic acid composition, uronic acid is D-glucuronic acid or L-iduronic acid. And linkage between these components and the presence and absence of sulfate group and the attachment of sulfate to sugar molecule, the nature of core protein linked to GAG, and the tissue and subcellular distribution of GAGs. So the GAGs, the glycosamino glycans or mucopolysaccharide, are differ with each other in these areas. Okay, and functions of GAGs. So the structural component of extracellular matrix. Okay, this is what the functional units, and it contributes to the turgor of various tissues. So the turgor pressure, it's prevent or save the joints with the pressure and act as the sieve in EC matrix, sieves. Okay, and it facilitates cell migration, act as shock absorbent at joint. ஷாக் அப்சார்பன்ஸ். ஒரு வேளை இது குதிக்கிறோம் நடக்கிறோம் அப்படின் போது நம்முடைய ஜாயிண்ட்ஸ், முட்டியில் இருக்கிற ஜாயிண்ட்ஸ், கால் ஜாயிண்ட்ஸ், கை வேறவர் அது ஒன்னோட உரசாமல் இருக்கிறதுக்கு என்ன பண்ணோம், இந்த கேக்ஸ் வந்து ரெண்டு நடுவில் ஒரு மாதிரி லூப்ரிகண்ட் இப்படி இருக்குன்னா இது வந்து ஒரு ஜாயிண்ட், இது ஒரு ஜாயிண்ட், அப்போ அந்த லூப்ரிகண்ட் மாதிரி என்ன பண்ணோம் ஃபங்க்ஷன் ஆகும். ஓகே, அண்ட் த மெயின்டெனன்ஸ் ஆஃப் கம்ப்ரெசிபிலிட்டி ஆஃப் கார்ட்லேஜ், hyaluronic acid and chondroitin sulfate, and have structural role in sclera and in corneal transparency, the keratin sulfate and dermatin sulfate, and act as anticoagulant. So the mucopolysaccharide is act as a anticoagulant. That is the main thing is what? The heparin. And that determine the charge, the selectiveness of renal glomerulus. So the heparin sulfate, which is determine the renal glomerulus. And formation of cell membrane and synaptic vesicle, which one? The heparin sulfate, also formation of cell membrane and synaptic vesicles. The specific gag of physiological segments are hyaluronic acid, dermatin sulfate, chondroitin sulfate, heparin sulfate, keratin sulfate. Okay, so classifications. GAGs are mucopolysaccharide. Okay, so this GAGs divided into two groups, sulfate free and sulfate containing. So here the hyaluronic acid is alone is sulfate free mucopolysaccharide, and these are the rest of five things, the five mucopolysaccharide are which contain sulfate, the chondroitin sulfate, dermatin sulfate, keratin sulfate, heparin and heparin sulfate. Chondroitin sulfate. So this chondroitin sulfate, which contain D-glucuronic acid and galactosamine. This is most abundant GAGs in the body. Body இருக்கிறதுலே ரொம்ப அதிகமா இருக்கக்கூடியது இந்த GAGs மட்டுமே. And so this is the structure of the chondroitin sulfate. So here we can see the glucuronic acid. So in sixth position we can see the COH and glucosamine. So here the first position, second position we can see amine group, and the fourth position we can see sulfate. So here we can see N-acetyl galactosamine. So N we can see here the CH3. So acetyl group, CH3COO. So acetyl group. So N-acetyl and galactose. Here NH. So galactose amine. We can see the sulfate at 4th position. So N-acetyl galactose amine for sulfate. This is called the altogether the D-glucuronic acid and the N-acetyl galactosamine for sulfate called chondroitin sulfate. So this is widely distributed in bone, cartilage, tendons. Functions in cartilage, it binds collagen and hold fibers in tight and strong network, role in the compressibility of cartilage in weight bearing along with the hyaluronic acid. And the types of chondroitin sulfate is chondroitin sulfate at 4th position C4 and C6. So the N-acetyl galactosamine 4 sulfate and 6 sulfate. These are the two types of chondroitin sulfate. Hyaluronic acid, so which contain the glucuronic acid and the galactosamine. It is sulfate-free GAGs. This is the only mucopolysaccharide in GAGs without sulfate. So the D-galactose, the glucuronic acid, and N-acetyl glucosamine. So when we see the sulfate group present, which contain the galactosamine, N-acetyl galactosamine. So when the sulfate group is not present, it's N-acetyl glucosamine. This is called the hyaluronic acid. So this is the ground substance of synovial fluid of joints, the vitreous humors of eyes and the connective tissues and tendons. So இருக்கிறது எங்க இருக்கும் human eyesல இருக்குது connective tissue இருக்குது tendonsலயும் இருக்குது. So hyaluronidase is an enzyme that breaks beta 1,4 linkages. They present in high concentration in testis, seminal fluids, and in certain the snake and insectus venoms. This present in high concentration of testis and seminal fluids and in certain snake சில பாம்புகளிலும் சில பூச்சி வகையிலும் இது அதிகமாக காணப்படும். Functions of hyaluronic acid. It serves as a lubricant and a shock absorbent in joints. நம்முடைய ஜாயிண்ட்டுக்கு என்ன பண்ணுது ஒவ்வொரு ஜாயிண்ட்ஸும் ஒரு இடிபாடுகளையும் ஷாக்லேருந்து காப்பாற்றுறதுன்னு தான் இந்த hyaluronic acid. Act as a sieve in external matrix and permits the cell migration during the embryogenesis, morphogenesis, and wound repair. Hyaluronidase enzyme of semen degrades the gel around ovum, allow effective penetration of sperm into ovum. The dermatin sulfate contain the hyaluronic acid and galactosamine. So the hyaluronic acid COYH and N-acetyl galactosamine 4 sulfate. See here again, when the sulfate is present in the GAGs, it's only with the galactose, not with the glucose. Okay, dermatin sulfate. And the present in skin, cardiac valves, tendons, functions present in the sclera of eye, where it has important functions in maintaining overall shape of eyes. Heparin, which contain the D-glucuronic acid and glucosamine. So it is the only intracellular GAG. So this is only present in intracellular, which is present inside the cell. So D-glucuronate 2 sulfate and N-sulfoglucosamine 6 sulfate. So it is act as an anticoagulant, prevent blood clotting, and strongly acidic due to presence of more sulfate group. Heparin helps in the release of enzyme lipoprotein lipase, helps in clear the lipodemia after fatty meal, also called as clearing factor. So heparin sulfate, same as heparin except some amino group carry acetyl group and percent of sulfate group are smaller. It is extracellular GAGs and present in basement membrane and as a ubiquitous component of cell surface. Keratin sulfate contain D-galactose plus glucosamine, only the GAG with no uronic acid, D-galactose and N-acetyl glucosamine 6 sulfate. Found in cornea and tendons. Types: keratin sulfate 1 cornea, keratin sulfate 2 skeletal muscle. Functions: maintain the corneal and the transparency. So this is the overall the flow charts of the GAG. Okay, so the GAGs, types of GAGs, glucosamine glycans, disaccharide units, and functions. Okay, so mainly the hyaluronic acid, which contain the N-acetyl glucosamine and glucuronic acid, functions lubricant, shock absorber, facilitate cell migrations. The contrast sulfate, it's N-acetyl galactosamine and glucuronic acid, and provide endoskeletal structure. Carotene sulfate, N-acetyl glucosamine galactose, and uric acid absent the transparency of cornea and overall shape of eyes. Dermatine sulfate, so amino sugar is N-acetyl galactosamine and hyaluronic acid to maintain the shape of the tissue. Heparin, glucosamine and glucuronic acid to act as an anticoagulant, and heparin sulfate is component of plasma membrane. Okay, this is the proteoglycans. The proteoglycans monomers typically are the bound non-covalent to a hyaluronic acid molecule in association with linker protein in the bottle brush arrangement. So bottle brush மாதிரி இருக்குது என்னது proteoglycans எல்லாம் இருக்கும்னா hyaluronic acid இருக்குது, ஸோ லிங்க் ப்ரோட்டீன் இருக்குது. ஸோ லிங்க் ப்ரோட்டீன் தானே பண்ணுது, ஒன்று அவனுக்கு வந்து இதை வந்து இந்த ப்ரஷ் மாதிரி இருக்கிறத லிங்க் பண்ணுது. அண்ட் கோர் ப்ரோட்டீன் எங்கே இருக்குன்னா லிங்க் ப்ரோட்டீனில் இருக்குது. அண்ட் கான்டெக்ட் சல்பேட் இருக்குது, கெரட்டின் சல்பேட் இருக்குது. ஓகே, ஸோ தேங்க்யூ.